Right now, you are watching this video thanks to an invisible nervous system that spans the entire globe. Millions of miles of fiber optic cables buried under our oceans, communicating with satellites in orbit, bouncing data back to your device at the speed of light. But consider what happens if it stops. Not a localized outage for an hour or a day. Consider a permanent global internet blackout. The immediate reaction is often relief. We imagine a welcome break from social media arguments and finally finding the time to read a book. This chart maps the reach of our digital infrastructure. As of 2026, over 6 billion people, roughly 74% of the human race, are now active nodes in this global network. Look at this schematic of a modern cellular network. When you make a call, cell towers catch your wireless 5G signal and immediately feed it into underground fiber optic cables. If those cables go dark, the physical link is severed. The device in your hand is essentially a walkie-talkie searching for a base station. Without those underground lines, there is no wireless cell service. At hour zero, individuals find themselves instantly isolated from the outside world. By hour 3, confusion escalates to panic as everyday local commerce abruptly halts. Try buying a bottle of water. You hand over a credit card, but the terminal fails. It requires an active IP connection to verify the transaction with your bank. Heading to the ATM offers no alternative. ATMs are simply specialized computers requiring that exact same network access to function. This data chart tracks global e-commerce. Without network routing, a $6.4 trillion market drops to zero instantaneously. For perspective, in 2025, just 28 temporary regional blackouts cost nearly $20 billion. A global wipeout renders that a microscopic rounding error. Hard physical cash remains the only functional currency left on Earth. Because very few people actually carry paper money, the vast majority of digital wealth and purchasing power have ceased to function. As nightfall arrives, the crisis shifts from financial paralysis to physical darkness. The modern power grid operates as a highly complex system. It relies on a continuous, active flow of digital information alongside copper wires and burning coal to maintain stability. Power stations use SCADA systems to monitor electricity demand in real time, dictating how much power to distribute. Without that constant data stream, the grid cannot balance the load. Energy flows blindly, spiking unpredictably, and frying the high-voltage transformers that regulate power for entire neighborhoods. The internet isn't an optional layer for our energy infrastructure. It is the control mechanism. Without it, the grid cannot sustain its own physical load, plunging whole regions into total blackout. By day 3, local supermarkets are completely empty. Decades ago, companies maintained warehouses packed with months of inventory to buffer against potential shortages. Today, supply chains prioritize lean efficiency to minimize storage costs. This logic flow outlines a business model known as just-in-time logistics. Instead of relying on static warehouses, goods move continuously through a lean pipeline linking suppliers directly to retail shelves, meaning supermarkets only hold about 3 days' worth of food at any given time. That entire pipeline relies on automated inventory trackers communicating over the web. When an item is purchased, the system automatically commands the supplier to ship more. Without those digital signals, the supply chain goes completely blind. Scale that local blindness up to global trade. Modern shipping ports receive millions of identical steel cargo containers every single day. Port authorities depend entirely on cloud-hosted databases and electronic manifests to identify exactly what is inside every single unmarked box. When the servers go dark, workers staring at a mountain of identical steel have absolutely no way to distinguish a container holding rotting fruit from one packed with life-saving insulin. The blackout has severed the flow of the world's most critical goods. Trucks have no routing data. Cargo ships drop anchor in harbors, paralyzed. For those who rely on daily medication, this infrastructure failure has become a life-or-death reality. And day 4 is just beginning. 30 days since the connection broke, the silent effects have cascaded into the physical world. Without networked sensors to balance electrical loads, the power grids failed weeks ago, leaving cities dark. Without digital inventory tracking, the trucks have stopped moving. The global stock market has now remained frozen for 30 consecutive days. Losing the web goes far beyond silent social media feeds. It severs data mobility, the invisible current that allows modern machines to know where they are and what they are supposed to do next. Modern financial systems do not physically move cash between bank vaults, they move bits of information. In our push for efficiency, we spent decades tearing up our analog foundations. We replaced physical logbooks and copper wires with digital sequences, leaving us with no structural fallback. The invisible digital backbone of global finance is the SWIFT network. Every single day, it handles over 40 million secure messages, moving trillions of dollars between global banks and governments. SWIFT relies heavily on cloud protocols to process those transfers. A permanent terrestrial blackout completely severs access to the global money supply. The records of ownership remain locked behind dead servers. Since these numbers can no longer be verified or moved, that digital wealth is effectively unusable. The economic collapse happens instantly. Anyone whose job involves software, digital finance, remote consulting, or data entry finds themselves out of work overnight. You might mistakenly assume we could bypass the dead cables by looking up and connecting to satellite internet. But satellite internet works by beaming a signal down to a dish, which is then hardwired into a terrestrial ground station. Without the underground fiber optic grid to receive and distribute that data, the advanced hardware orbiting in space is rendered completely useless. There is absolutely no wireless escape. Every modern communication protocol ultimately anchors back to the destroyed physical grid. We wouldn't fall all the way back to the Stone Age. We would eventually stabilize at the technological baseline of the 1980s. The primary barrier preventing a fast transition is that telecom companies spent the last decade proactively destroying that exact infrastructure. Millions of miles of legacy copper telephone wires were intentionally torn out of the ground to make room for fiber optics. Rebuilding an analog communication network from scratch requires an immense amount of manual labor. Because of the massive geographical scale, physically reestablishing basic analog phone lines will take years of grueling work. In our pursuit of digital speed, we dismantled our own escape routes, leaving humanity trapped in a disconnected dark age. The global village we know today would fracture into thousands of isolated, self-sustaining communities. Information sharing becomes strictly hyperlocal. Newspapers and physical print media make an immediate comeback. With GPS satellites offline, analog navigation tools become mandatory again. Devoid of crowdsourced digital databases, physical encyclopedias become the definitive sources of truth. Surviving tech enthusiasts would likely build localized mesh networks or rely on shortwave ham radio setups to send brief messages between neighboring towns. For some, there is a strange silver lining. The forced removal of social media algorithms might actually improve baseline mental health in these localized towns. But that psychological relief is eclipsed by a significant loss of global stability and scientific momentum. We have built a planetary nervous system. It has accelerated human progress, cured diseases, connected loved ones across oceans, and educated billions. The internet has transitioned from a tool we use to the actual environment we inhabit. We're only now noticing the architecture of that world because the walls have disappeared. But for now, the signal remains, which means you can still hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what you would do if the internet went down forever.